Never give up. Master your mind before success finds you. The wind is howling, and your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. Every fiber of your evolutionary biology is screaming at you to run in the opposite direction. Now imagine that this cliff isn't physical. It is a career transition. It is the aftermath of a massive failure. It is the daunting blank page of a dream you've put off for a decade. In that precise moment, what determines whether you take the leap or freeze in terror? Most of us have been taught a fundamental lie. We've been told that our intellect, our IQ, our strategic plans, our sheer technical capability is the captain of our destiny. We believe that if we are just smart enough, analyze the data deeply enough, and work ourselves to the bone, success is a mathematical guarantee. But it isn't. There is a silent, ancient architecture buried deep within your skull that doesn't care about your resume, your degrees, or your 5-year business plan. It is the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. When you face adversity, rejection, or the agonizing quiet of a setback, this tiny, almond-shaped structure triggers an emotional hijack. It floods your body with cortisol, clouds your rational prefrontal cortex, and whispers a single, devastating command: give up. Protect yourself. Stay safe. This is why brilliant minds stall out. This is why highly talented individuals abandon their dreams when the road gets rocky. They have mastered their crafts, but they have never mastered their own neurobiology. They are waiting for success to find them, hoping that external validation will finally quiet their internal chaos. But the truth is far more demanding. You must master the climate of your mind before you can ever hope to navigate the weather of the world. If you do not learn to govern your impulses, translate your anxieties, and harness your own inner drive, you will remain a hostage to your mood swings and a victim of circumstance. By listening to this complete speech, you will not just hear another empty, cheerleader-style pep talk. Instead, we are going to dismantle the biological mechanics of perseverance. You will discover how to rewrite the default panic settings of your brain, convert frustrating setbacks into psychological fuel, and build an unshakable inner resilience. More importantly, you will learn why chasing external success is a trap, and how cultivating a quiet, focused mastery of your own mind is the only true way to ensure that when your moment finally arrives, you are actually ready to hold on to it. Academic intelligence and technical talent are merely threshold skills. It is our emotional self-management that ultimately decides if those skills ever bear fruit. True resilience begins with a quiet, honest inventory of our internal state. We cannot master what we refuse to acknowledge. Emotional impulses can easily bypass our rational thinking. True mental mastery lies in the brief pause between a trigger and our response. To truly never give up, our drive must be fueled by a deep-seated passion and inner commitment to growth, rather than the pursuit of temporary, external rewards. Real success is not a solo pursuit. Mastering our own minds allows us to connect deeply and empathetically with others, creating a shared architecture for lasting achievement. We have long been conditioned to believe that the ultimate predictor of a life well lived, of a career marked by relentless triumph, is cognitive capacity. We look at standardized test scores, elite degrees, and technical brilliance as the gold standards of human potential. Yet, if you look closely at the actual trajectory of human endeavors, a glaring paradox emerges. The classrooms of elite institutions are filled with brilliant minds who, upon entering the turbulent waters of the real world, find themselves adrift, unable to translate their formidable intellect into sustained achievement. This is because academic intelligence, or what we commonly measure as IQ, is fundamentally a threshold capability. It is the entry ticket, the baseline requirement that gets you through the door and onto the playing field. It secures you the job interview, the initial funding, or the seat at the table. But once you are in the room, the predictive power of IQ rapidly diminishes. When the pressure mounts, when a critical project stalls, or when an unexpected market shift threatens your livelihood, cognitive brilliance alone offers no shield. In fact, without the stabilizing force of emotional self-management, a high IQ can actually become a liability. The highly intellectual mind is exceptionally skilled at constructing elaborate rationalizations for fear, creating complex scenarios of failure that justify giving up. When we lack the capacity to regulate our internal states, our intellect becomes subservient to our anxieties. Imagine a high-performance sports car, equipped with a state-of-the-art engine, but possessing a deeply flawed steering mechanism. No matter how powerful the engine is, the car cannot navigate a winding, treacherous mountain road at high speed without crashing. The engine is your IQ. The steering mechanism is your self-management. This is not merely a philosophical argument. It is a neurological reality. The prefrontal cortex, the executive center of the brain responsible for strategic planning, creative problem-solving, and decision-making, shares a highly sensitive neural pathway with the amygdala, the brain's emotional radar. When we encounter setbacks, the amygdala registers stress and triggers a biological cascade of cortisol and adrenaline. Under the influence of these chemicals, the working memory capacity of the prefrontal cortex is severely compromised. In essence, when you are gripped by unmanaged anxiety, frustration, or despair, you temporarily lose access to your own cognitive resources. You become, quite literally, cognitively impaired in that moment. The brilliant strategist becomes reactive. The creative innovator freezes. Therefore, the true differentiator between those who abandon their pursuits and those who ultimately triumph is not the raw capacity of their intellect, but the efficiency of their emotional self-management. It is the ability to recognize the onset of a stress response and actively quiet the nervous system, thereby preserving the cognitive space needed to think clearly and act deliberately. Self-management acts as the vital gatekeeper of your talent. It ensures that your hard-won technical skills, your strategic insights, and your creative visions are not held hostage by momentary emotional storms. It is the quiet internal discipline that allows you to keep your hands steady on the wheel, ensuring that your cognitive potential is never squandered, but is instead allowed to mature, adapt, and eventually bear the fruit of true, enduring success. True resilience, the kind that endures long after the initial wave of excitement has faded, does not begin with an outward display of bravado or a stubborn refusal to bend. Instead, it begins in the quiet, often uncomfortable spaces of our own minds, with a profound and unyielding commitment to self-awareness. To master our internal landscape and prepare ourselves for the arrival of success, we must first be willing to take a precise, honest, and non-judgmental inventory of our internal state. Most of our daily lives are lived in a state of emotional default. We react to triggers, succumb to moods, and make decisions based on subtle, underlying currents of feeling that we barely register. We are like ships being tossed about by an invisible undercurrent, unaware of why we are drifting off course. Self-awareness is the act of shining a steady, penetrating light into those dark waters, revealing the hidden forces that drive our behavior. Without this foundational awareness, Any attempt at self-discipline or perseverance is merely a fragile facade. You cannot manage an emotion that you do not know you are having. When we experience a setback, a rejected proposal, a critical remark from a colleague, or a slow period in our progress, our bodies react before our conscious minds do. A tightening in the chest, a sudden spike in heart rate, or a defensive urge to withdraw are all physiological indicators of an emotional shift. The self-aware individual has trained themselves to notice these subtle physical cues. Rather than immediately reacting to the discomfort by lashing out or giving up, they pause. They identify the emotion, naming it with precision. This is not just anger. This is the fear of being inadequate. This simple act of naming an emotion shifts the neural activity from the reactive, emotional centers of the brain to the rational, thinking centers. It transforms a blinding fog of feelings into an object of objective study. Furthermore, self-awareness demands that we confront our personal blind spots, those habitual patterns of thinking and reacting that we ignore, but everyone else can clearly see. Many of us harbor deep-seated narratives about our own limitations, stories we tell ourselves to justify our failures, or to protect us from the pain of trying and failing again. We might believe we are not cut out for leadership, or that we are inherently disorganized, or that success is reserved for a different kind of person. These self-limiting beliefs operate beneath the level of conscious thought, silently sabotaging our efforts. By cultivating self-awareness, we drag these invisible narratives into the light of day. We examine them, question their validity, and realize that they are not absolute truths, but merely old defense mechanisms we have outgrown. Ultimately, we cannot master what we refuse to acknowledge. To ignore our fears, our anxieties, or our anger is to hand them the steering wheel of our lives. Only when we possess the courage to stand face to face with our internal realities, fully acknowledging our strengths, our weaknesses, our triggers, and our emotional habits, do we gain the power to change them. Self-awareness does not make the difficult emotions disappear. Rather, it changes our relationship to them. It ensures that when the inevitable storms of self-doubt and frustration arrive, we do not become lost in them. Instead, we stand anchored in the truth of who we are, observing the storm with a calm clarity, ready to steer ourselves deliberately toward the goals we have chosen. Within the architecture of the human brain lies an ancient survival mechanism that, while once essential for keeping our ancestors alive, now poses the single greatest threat to our modern ambitions and long-term success. This is the phenomenon known as the amygdala hijack, an immediate, overwhelming emotional response that completely bypasses our rational thinking mind. The amygdala, acting as the brain's sentinel, is constantly scanning our environment for threats. In the prehistoric wilderness, a split-second delay in reacting to a rustle in the bushes could mean the difference between survival and death. Therefore, the brain was wired to prioritize speed over accuracy, routing sensory information directly to the amygdala for an instantaneous physical response, flooding the body with adrenaline, raising the heart rate, and preparing us to fight, flee, or freeze. The dilemma we face today is that our neural wiring has not evolved as quickly as our civilization. To the amygdala, a critical email from a supervisor, a public speaking opportunity, a harsh piece of feedback, or a sudden financial setback triggers the exact same chemical emergency as a physical predator. When this hijack occurs, the neural pathways to the prefrontal cortex, the seat of working memory, logical reasoning, and impulse control, are effectively shut down. In a state of emotional capture, we are temporarily deprived of our highest cognitive faculties. We find ourselves acting on raw impulse, saying words we immediately regret, making rash decisions, or throwing up our hands and quitting because the discomfort feels entirely intolerable. True mental mastery and the ability to persist through adversity do not require us to eliminate these emotional impulses, which is biologically impossible. Instead, mastery lies in recognizing the hijack as it happens and mastering the critical, brief pause between a trigger and our response. It is within this fraction of a second, this silent gap in our neural circuitry, that our entire destiny is decided. When a setback occurs and the familiar wave of panic, anger, or defeat begins to swell, the untrained mind immediately reacts, amplifying the crisis. The master of the mind, however, recognizes the physical onset of the hijack, the shallow breathing, the racing pulse, the urge to lash out or retreat, and uses that awareness as a signal to pause. By consciously breathing deeply, slowing down, and refusing to react immediately, you actively recruit the parasympathetic nervous system to counteract the adrenaline surge. This physical intervention allows the prefrontal cortex to come back online, restoring your capacity for rational thought. In that moment of restored clarity, you transition from a state of mindless reaction to one of mindful response. You are no longer a victim of your evolutionary wiring. You are an active agent of your own destiny. You gain the ability to look at a devastating failure not as a signal to flee, but as a complex problem requiring a strategic, measured solution. Managing this neural boundary is what separates those who are perpetually derailed by life's inevitable friction from those who can maintain a calm, deliberate focus, ensuring that their long-term vision is never compromised by a momentary emotional storm. To persist in the face of relentless obstacles, to genuinely embrace the philosophy of never giving up, we must fundamentally examine the source of the fuel that powers our journey. Too often, we embark on pursuits driven by what psychologists refer to as extrinsic motivators: the promise of wealth, the allure of status, the applause of our peers, or the desire to prove someone else wrong. While these external rewards can provide a powerful initial spark, they are highly volatile and ultimately unsustainable energy sources. When you are driven solely by the expectation of external validation, your resilience is entirely dependent on the feedback you receive from the world. If the world ignores you, rejects you, or fails to reward you quickly enough, your motivation evaporates. You are left feeling depleted, questioning the value of your labor, and ultimately succumbing to the temptation to abandon your path. The master of the mind understands that enduring success requires a shift from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. This is an inner drive fueled by a deep-seated passion, an alignment with core personal values, and an inherent commitment to self-mastery and growth. When you are intrinsically motivated, the reward is not just the trophy at the finish line. The reward is the very act of running the race. You are driven by a profound curiosity, a desire to see how far you can stretch your capabilities, and a sense of purpose that exists independent of public acclaim. This internal locus of control changes your entire relationship with failure. A setback is no longer a devastating verdict on your worth as a person. It is simply an inevitable educational milestone on the path of development. Cultivating this intrinsic drive requires a disciplined focus on the process rather than the outcome. It means finding satisfaction in the daily, unglamorous work that no one else sees, the quiet hours of practice, the meticulous refinement of your craft, and the gradual building of competence. When you fall in love with the process of improvement, the external world loses its power to derail you. If success finds you, it finds you already deeply engaged in meaningful work. If success is delayed, you continue to work anyway, because the work itself sustains you. This is the psychological shield that protects against burnout. It transforms perseverance from a grueling exercise in self-denial into an active, life-affirming expression of who you are, ensuring that your energy is constantly renewed from a deep, inexhaustible wellspring within. We often carry a romanticized, highly distorted image of the high achiever as a solitary genius, a rugged individualist who conquers mountains, builds empires, and overcomes adversity purely through the sheer force of their own isolated will. But this myth of the lone operator is a dangerous illusion that ignores the fundamental biology of human achievement. We are, at our core, deeply social creatures. Our brains are wired with mirror neurons and limbic pathways designed to pick up on, harmonize with, and react to the emotional states of those around us. Because of this open-loop design of our emotional circuitry, real success can never be a solo pursuit. The ultimate test of mental mastery is not how well we can govern our thoughts in a vacuum, but how effectively we can channel that inner stability outward to create a shared architecture of trust, collaboration, and collective resilience. When we develop the capacity for self-awareness and self-regulation, we do not just improve our own internal lives, we radically alter the social field around us. A leader, a partner, or a teammate who remains calm, empathetic, and clear-headed in the midst of a crisis acts as an emotional thermostat for the entire group. Just as a panicked individual can trigger a wave of anxiety in a room, a person who has mastered their own mind has the power to soothe the collective nervous system of an organization. This is where the critical component of empathy comes into play. Empathy is not a soft, passive virtue. It is a highly active cognitive and emotional skill. It is the ability to accurately read the unspoken feelings, worries, and motivations of others, and to use that understanding to build bridges of genuine connection. By mastering our own minds, we unlock the ability to move beyond self-interest and engage in the deep, active listening required to truly understand the perspectives of our peers. This emotional intelligence forms the bedrock of influence, conflict resolution, and high-performance teamwork. In a world of staggering complexity, the challenges we face are far too massive for any single intellect to solve alone. True breakthrough success requires the synergy of diverse minds working in harmony. If you cannot manage your own ego, if you cannot tolerate constructive criticism, or if you lack the emotional agility to navigate the inevitable friction of human relationships, you will inevitably alienate the very people you need to achieve your grandest vision. Perseverance, then, becomes a shared endeavor. When we foster an environment of psychological safety and mutual respect, we create a network of support that can absorb the shocks of failure. When one person stumbles, the collective strength of the group lifts them back up. By aligning our personal pursuit of mastery with a commitment to the well-being and growth of those around us, we build an unshakable ecosystem of success. We discover that our individual capacity is multiplied exponentially when it is woven into a larger fabric of shared purpose, proving that the heights we can reach are determined not by how far we can climb alone, but by how effectively we can climb together.